you can do this, and this is the thing I can't do, and I was going to get to. If you can do this from a state of contentment, joy, happiness, bliss, and surrender with what you know, with what you have, with who you are, with the experience you have right now, in the very moment, now and now and now, forever, then you've got it mastered. Because if we need that next thing, if we need to get the basketball shot in, or we need to get this business goal, or we need to graduate university, or we need to get this house, there's always going to be another thing that will prevent you from being whole, blissful, harmonious now.
To reality. This is Josh Trent. We're here on Facebook Live. It's been a minute. I'm here with a very special guest. His name is Matt Belair. He is a human potential specialist. You know, in all his work, I'm sure he has lots of, Matt, I'm sure you have lots of special intros, but I'm just going to introduce you as someone who is a brother. You're a friend of mine. You're a specialist in consciousness. You're a specialist in what it is to make sense of this potential of human life. So thank you for being a part of the narrative of truth lately with COVID. And you were actually just sharing with me before we got on that you were just removed from Facebook. Like, what the hell's going on here? Like, why are they removing you from Facebook, man?
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for having me on the show, and thanks for the work you do. It's awesome because, I was aware of your work, but I became very aware of it when the whole COVID thing happened, because I think you're like me, where you want to figure out what the truth is, what's going on. You just kind of want to know what's happening. And so when you dive in, you start to realize that there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes. And you were one of the few people who are actually speaking out. And I was curious why nobody was saying anything. And I was like, either you can't figure it out, you haven't looked into it, or you know what's going on, but you're choosing not to say anything, which for me, something that I learned, I need to just learn how to accept. I just don't understand why people would be quiet in times like this. And I go between that quote. I think it's Edwin. There's a few quotes like this, and it says like, evil persists when good men do nothing. I go between that quote and that ideology and kind of the Zen side of just surrendering to what is. But I kind of go with the Edmund Burke side, because we want to I think we need to do something, right? If we want to affect change, we need to actually do something. We need to actually say something. So I appreciate you and your work and actually saying something. And I kind of getting a little bit of crap for it. I kicked off Facebook. I know maybe it's because I interviewed David Martin from Plandemic 2, and I've been talking about it from the beginning, but it's weird because a lot of other people are out there, and it's sad because I had they deleted my personal, my business, that's 5 years of work. And it was 5 years of dedicated to interviewing the leaders in, similar to you, consciousness, spirituality, self-help, personal development. There's a track record of what I was trying to put out to the world. And then COVID happens, and this is just something that kind of directed the focus of the whole planet. And so even my intention when it first happened was to discover the truth, share the truth. So if it's the most deadly thing that's ever happened, let people know how they can protect themselves. But it turned out to be something else, and try to share that so people were less afraid, because when you're afraid, you limit pattern recognition, you make stupid choices, and all kinds of negative things happen. And I learned that from sports psychology and helping extreme sports athletes be the best they can be, because we deal with fear all the time. But it limits your freedom. That, the bottom line is it limits your freedom and potential. And so I was trying to share information to make people less afraid. So yeah, man, it's crazy times.
We've been on this private thread too with Sayer G and Dr. Kelly Brogan and so many other amazing people that are really interested in, hey, even if it's scary, even if it's challenging, even if it might be a shock to the system, to the ego, something's going on here and it ain't normal. And the truth will reign, the truth will prevail. But man, it has been the ultimate gut check moment for me. I know it has been for you and so many people. Like, how have you personally been navigating this? Obviously, in this podcast, man, I'm stoked to talk with you about human potential and consciousness. But just like, let's ring the bell here for in the moment, like how you're actually feeling right now with everything that we're going through, not just in health and wellness and personal development, but you as a father, you as a husband, you as a business owner. Like, what's it been like for you? What's it been like for you these past 6 months?
It's a great question because it's very real, and for me, it's been incredibly challenging. When it first happened, and I realized this is happening, I spent basically 3 months all day, every day researching. So I was just staring at my computer for 10, 12 hours a day, going through information, documents, podcasts like yours, anyone putting out good information, and so I could get a handle on this. So I knew I would know what I was talking about, and so that sucked. It's not a pleasant thing to do to stare at your computer for that long. So that's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but part of the work. And then I got to a place of this is terrible because you can see the plan. The plan is laid out. They call it, some people call it a plandemic because of Event 201, because you go back to germ theory versus terrain theory. Then you go to the Flexner Report of 1910, the hijacking of modern medicine. And so you can see all that. And then you can see the future with strategic intelligence websites, with the Rockefeller future scenarios documents, which is we're basically in lockstep. But with the World Economic Forum and strategic intelligence, that map laid out 200 layers deep. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yes.
And you're like, oh my god! And then ID 2020 and all the players in this, and then that is terrifying. And so I was like, oh my god, I'm worried about the world my daughter might grow up in if we don't change here. And then interviewing people like David Martin from Plandemic 2, and some of the other people out there like Robert Kennedy Jr. and Del Bigtree and these lead and Sayer G and Kelly and all these amazing people speaking up, and you see this very strong light and truth. And it's just like the Robert Kennedy debate with Alan Dershowitz on vaccines. When you put the two sides together, and one is on truth and reality and not fear mongering. The other side, they don't have a foot to stand on. He absolutely destroyed him. It was like Mike Tyson beating up a small child. There was no, Allen didn't have anything because it was, a little bit of manipulation, and there's really nothing there. And Robert Kennedy Jr. just picked him apart, told the truth, and presented the evidence as it was. And so that's inspiring, that the truth can kind of cut through all that fear and ignorance. And I remember at one point during this, I was really concerned. I was going through a hard time, and I just was like, "Spirit, I need some help here." And I went out and I did a sitting there, and I was like, "Oh, I'm supposed to meditate right now." I got one of those feelings. I sat down and I did a meditation, and I haven't been meditating frequently normally, so that's probably due to some of the increased stress. But it
Yeah.
was one of those amazing meditations you've probably had before, and the insight that I got, it kind of goes into the indescribable world. So it was awesome that I got to go super deep. But the message was like, this only thrives through ignorance and fear, like through this blanket, right? And so light and truth and just universal force is it's like what Walter Russell will call life affirming. It's a life affirming force, and that's the truth. And it cuts through all of that. The only way that this goes through is through fear, and basically manipulating the truth through all of these different deceptions. But the truth will cut through that so quickly, and that universal force is stronger. So it gave me this little like, don't worry, like this life affirming force that grows the trees, spirit, God, nature, the universe is still present. It's still here, and it is much more powerful than all this dark stuff that you're looking at. So that, I would say, is how I've been feeling in a nutshell. So I've been going up and down, I'll say.
Man, thanks for sharing, because I know that Zen has been a practice for you, like this pursuit of inner peace and martial arts and snowboarding. Like you've run quite the gamut in like what it means to be a human here on the planet. And I love that you're just so honest with us. Like, hey, we're on the journey too. Like on this podcast, we're always exploring like the path between knowing and doing. You are trained in Zen and martial arts. You know how amazing it is to meditate, yet you're here with us and you're being honest. Like, yeah, I haven't been meditating as much as I normally have been. Like, what do you think that's all about? Because that's the same thing for me. Like, I know that I should be, quote, should be doing certain things. Sometimes I do them. And sometimes I'm aware that I don't. And what I'm most mindful of is that I don't go into a shame spiral or any kind of self-judgment or self-hatred about when I miss them. I just literally go to the next loop, go right back on the horse. Why do you think that is right now for you? And how does that extrapolate to all of us with our health habits right now?
It's a really great question. I think that if you go into the fields of wellness and peak performance and let's say morning routines, there's a million things you could do. And I've kind of listed them all down and I like to experiment with everything. So I'll test it. I don't care what the thing is out there. If it's supposed to increase your consciousness or, help you be enlightened or whatever, I've traveled to 30 countries and trained with some interesting people to try to figure it out to know if it works. And so there's a lot of things you can do but you just can't do everything. So having a solid practice is really important. So although I might have not been meditating, but I would be taking care of my body through skateboarding, because if you have your focus, then it's something. And I was doing a lot more running. And so I was creating, not like a sitting meditation, but a running meditation, which was interesting. So, but when you increase in your stress, so for me personally, what helps is actually just a sitting meditation, not running, not skateboarding, anything else, not sitting meditation. So knowing that I could come back to it. And so for people out there, there's a lot of different things, but you got to practice things consistently to know what they do. And so meditation, for example, when I really wanted to dive in, I spent 3 months in koala habitat, reading, writing, meditating, sometimes it's 4 and 6 hours a day.
You said
And I also,
koala habitat?
yeah, at a koala habitat in near Byron Bay, in Australia.
Were you
So
like hanging
yeah,
in the trees with these
they were
animals?
in the trees. Yeah, man. I'd love to be, but yeah, there's koalas in the trees. And it was
That's
super
so
cool.
cool.
And this kind of hippie camper. So, I did a really hard sit there for a duration of time. And then I
Hmm.
also meditated for about an hour a day for about a year. Straight. So I know what the practice means done consistently, just like if you were to do yoga every day for a year, or if you want to be peak performance in anything, art, music, business, sports, it doesn't matter. You need that dedication. And so my suggestion to people is just keep that practice simple, because a lot of times we believe we have enough time to do it, but we don't. So it's prioritizing, what's most important to us.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that I could take this conversation with you, man. But the one thing that's like super top of mind for me and top of heart is where we still are with people's minds and really their fear response, their amygdala around COVID-19. And it's no surprise that like you're getting banned and we're doing this show. We actually just did a 6-part series with some of the people that you had mentioned. And I actually did SEO research because I'm like, I don't want this thing to get removed. The truth right now is so subjective, and there's this war between information on one side and information on the other. And I got to tell you, like, I've never been so fucking triggered, but I've also never been so excited for the squeeze that we're experiencing. What is your like state of the union at this stage of where we are with COVID? It's been pretty exciting to see like certain states open up recently. Tennessee and Florida. I think Florida was the first one. But where does this lie with your heart and mind right now with everything that you've been through? You've been a huge voice in this world when it comes to COVID-19.
Wow. Well, what I would say to anybody out there who is just observing the world, challenging time for everybody. To have compassion for your fellow man is the first thing that I would suggest. Training with Native American elders, David Lombear Senepas, he would just say, the best thing that you can do is 3 kind acts a day. Go out of your way to do it and don't tell anyone. And so it's a really great question. So I think first, compassion for others, as we're sifting through this information. And one thing that I'd suggest for people is applying something called the formula for truth. And I love this. I learned this a long time ago from a guy named Corey Herter. And it basically says truth evolves. There's, information evolves. And so
Mm-hmm.
let's say if you got an X and Y axis, on the X axis, you have flat Earth, and on the Y axis, you have round Earth, right? On X-axis, you could have COVID-19 is the deadliest disease of all time ever, and then on the Y-axis is a conspiracy, right? When you're communicating with people, just be open to their side. So truth is somewhere about 45 degrees of information. So let's say you're a round earther and they're a flat earther. They've got their 45 degrees of information, and they only have their one perception. And you only have your one perception. And so when you just open up to their side, you're opening up to 45 degrees of information for that one person, but every other person you meet too. And that's the reason why you do a podcast. You receive a lot of information. So rather than trying to prove your point or shut it down, you listen. And that's why for me, listening to the COVID stuff, you know, I've listened to people saying this is the most deadly thing ever, and I say, why? Explain it to me, draw it out. But then we come to the same conclusions. We see the death rate, we see who's vulnerable, we get down to the science and what we know for empirically with the data. It's actually not that frightening. And so, the truth ends up coming out. And so if we can apply the formula for truth, we're going to learn a lot more. So that's another thing that I'd suggest. But at the same time, what's happening is people are just going into this divide and conquer, attack each other, right? They're not offering opinion. Because they're afraid. They're offering logical fallacy. They're offering hate speech and all this other stuff. And so, if you're not doing that, it just takes a lot of resilience and patience to receive that and not to give it back. And so, what I would suggest to people is if you're going to look into this, look into it. Look at both sides, right and left. Do a lot of research. Follow people who have been correct the whole time, because people like Del Bigtree and David Martin, the people who have followed this from the beginning, they haven't changed their story. They've been correct the whole time. And so when we live in fear and the masses, there's also too, if you study psychology, one of my original inquiries was, why do we have war and starvation? And so that led me into psychological operations and how people are manipulated and things like that. And you look at the work of Edward Bernays, who was Sigmund Freud's nephew, and he basically did propaganda for World War I and World War II, and he really mastered it. This group really mastered propaganda and are incredible at it. And they talk about the group mind as well. So you have the individual mind, but you also have the group mind. And Darren Brown does great experiments on this as well, as what happens with group mind, what happens with group think. And these people know that. And the biggest trigger for all of this is fear. Fear releases the chemicals in your brain that limits pattern recognition. So you're kind of tunnel vision and you're not making the same choices. And so
can you go a little bit deeper into that, Matt? Because that's huge, man. With your you studied NLP quite a bit, right? How the brain functions. Yeah. So I know from your training, I don't want to interrupt you too much here, but there's a really big point to this. When people are stuck in amygdala and in ancient brain, in fear brain, what's going on with the PFC and the posterior cingulate cortex? Like, we're literally a slave to our biology in these moments, and that's when we're harvested for what's true and what's not by the media.
Yeah, I love that, man. Well, you can explain it scientifically. It's fun because for me, the way that my mind learns things, I'll read a whole NLP. I've done multiple NLP courses. I'll just know what I'm supposed to do. That's what I remember. You know what I mean? I'm like, I can't remember which chemical. Like if you listen to Stephen Kotler, I've done a bunch of his courses. He'll tell you the chemicals and exactly how they work. But what I remember is, this is what I need to avoid. And so, like, for example, I trained a lot of extreme sports athletes. The difference between an extreme sports athlete and martial arts as well is that if we frig it up, we have a severe consequence that could happen immediately. So we need to handle fear right there, or we're going to be toast. So if you want to do like a double backflip, or you want to do a trick that's never been done, like one of my athletes, Brody Carmichael, he on a front flip on a friggin' motorcycle, and he said, "Hey man, I heard you're good. I want to land a." I said, "Great, let's have a chat." So we were chatting, and he was telling me about his want to do, and it was pretty good. And so I said, "Look, man, you don't have to read my book, but you can. And I got an online course you could do, but you don't really have to. What you need to do is you need to visualize this trick an hour a day, every day until you can land it. And so that same power, you can harness it, right? And you can build up the knowledge, the skill, and the inner knowing to go do something courageous." And so 2 weeks later, he landed the front flip. 2 weeks after that, he lands the world's first front flip heel clicker. 2 weeks after that, he lands the world's first front flip Superman on a frickin' motorcycle, just using a simple, accessible visualization process. And so when we're in fear, let's say we're a Shaolin monk, or we're a samurai warrior, we would go into war. And there's bow and arrows, and there's axes, and there's all kinds of mayhem, like real danger, right? Out there that would be terrifying. The second you go into fear, all the chemicals in your brain, you fight, flight, or freeze, right? That's essentially what's going to happen, and you're toast. But if you can remain calm, you're able to allow all of the information of the external world to come in, to allow the body and the training and the inner knowing all to work out exactly as you need it to. But the second that fear takes over, you're blinded, and you can't make the same choice that you could make, and that you should make or could make, and you definitely don't go into flow state. You're definitely not going into your peak performance state. So
Yeah.
when we and in hypnosis too, I'll just kind of finish with this. The reason why they always pump you full of like all the headlines and things like that. If I say, don't think about the American flag, your mind will do it. Or if you take it one step further and I say, just imagine a little cat right now, and I'm holding a cat, and he's a nice little cat. Then all of a sudden I stab the cat. Now the cat's dying, and then I rip off the cat's head. My apologies for doing that. And usually if I'm coaching somebody, I'll draw that out more, and I don't like doing it because it's easier to know the negative stuff. But by listening to that, you feel an emotion. I didn't tell you to feel an emotion. Most people who have empathy are like, oh my God, poor cat.
Yeah.
And so we didn't choose the emotion to arise. So when we're looking out in our world and we're taking in all these mental nutriments from the news and fear the virus and blah, 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 our bodies are creating an automatic and unconscious response that limits our immune system. First of all, it decreases it, and it makes us afraid. And so we are not in expansion, love, thriving, or community, which is another big thing. When we're in that state, we're very suspect of our fellow man. We're not trusting. We're not in faith. We're in a whole nother state of being, and it's a dangerous state of being. And so it's very important that when we add the perspective, like I remember one of the first news things I saw was 2 million people could die or 10 million people could die, right? Something like that. Well, that's terrifying. As 10 million people would die, but there's no context.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if it's actually 3.4 of this model that turned out to be way off, and if everybody in the world got it. So then when you add these context pieces in there, you can remove the fear a little bit, but the way that it gets hit the average person, they're not going to be able to do that. They're just going to take on the fear, and it's going to affect their whole day. It's going to affect their communications. It's going to affect how they treat their family. It's going to affect how they make choices in the coming days and weeks. And so if there's terrible stuff coming down the line, they're going to sign up for whatever those terrible choices are so that they are safe from whatever this threat may be.
Wow, man, there's so much to unpack there. Like the first thing that I'm feeling is we are all doing the absolute best that we can with the level of consciousness that we have. And so I'm not here to shame. I'm not here to belittle people. I'm not here to say like it's pro-mask versus mask wearing. It's Democrat, Republican. I think it's all honestly bullshit division tactics. What I am saying is there is a ever-present truth. There is like a self-evident truth that I think if you took away all the people's fear responses, it's sitting right there in their soul. It's sitting right there in their heart. And the ever-present truth is that we have all forgotten how incredibly powerful we are, how full of love we are, how we came to this planet to do amazing things. Like this is the part about COVID and the squeeze that I'm stoked about. Like, and I loved how you described what you had learned from your training and the pro athletes. Cause like we look up to athletes. Like I think about Danny Way jumping the Great Wall and I'm like, oh my God, like, you know, the amount of fortitude that this guy, the amount of courage that he had to have to do that. What else did you pull from these athletes that potentially we can learn about how we can apply that now just as everyday people?
Yeah, well, Danny Way is a great example because there's an even crazier story with him. In one of the X Games, when they first did the big air, you do a big launch and then you go up a quarter pipe and just absolutely launch yourself. Well, on one of the X Games, he launches himself up, and I invite people to look this up on YouTube because he goes like 30, 40 feet in the air and he hits his knees on the coping and absolutely destroys himself.
Oh.
Like, you don't think he's going to be skating for months or weeks. He gets right back up and he does it. He does the trick he was going for and he wins gold. And so for me, it's like this, yeah, like you said, is a good example or wording for it. It's the fortitude and the inner will. And my question was, when I was younger, what are humans capable of? What am I capable of? And so that's what I've kind of spent my life studying. And I've had so many people on my podcast that have cured themselves of cancer. Like lots of firsthand, I've traveled to 30 countries, talked to lots of people have done that. And most people say that's impossible. So, you know, when you slide down the scale and then you look at like Wim Hof, like all the stuff that he's done, none of that's supposed to be possible. When I trained with the Shaolin monks, you're not supposed to be able to break stone with 2 fingers. But they can do that. And they had extraordinary training. And so when you come back to human potential, right? Rather than the weakest link. And I feel like that's what's happening here is we're looking at the world through the lens of the weakest link so we can all go down to this level. And because like take snowboarding away, because for some people going off a 70-foot jump, they're scared of it and they could hurt themselves. Yeah, but I have that capability through training and through practice. So I'd like to have that experience, please. Just like driving a car. Driving a car is dangerous. Being alive is a dangerous thing. We knew that back in the day when we would come out of the cave and a lion would eat one of our homies, but then we would adapt and we would say, hey, watch out for that big yellow thing because that could eat you. But we have to continue to progress. And if we never left the cave after that, we wouldn't be expanding and evolving. And so we are so infinitely powerful. And it's not like something that's given to a few and not others. Like, they say like God is within, our spirit is within, our potential is within. And if you look at any spiritual book, that's worth reading, it'll say that. And the amount of incredible stories of healing, of miracles, of human potential, of goodness and kindness that exist in the world versus what's going on now, it's sad because we have that capability. And for something like this, it's like we're forgetting what we're capable of. We're not talking about building a utopia. We're not talking about recreating what Atlantis would have been. When I study with the Native Americans, they say the next big upgrade for humanity is peace. We're not talking about world peace. Imagine you switch COVID-19 to world peace. Every single day, as much as they bang you with the numbers of COVID-19, they were saying world peace. We are so committed to world peace. We will not stop until we resolve all the issues of power and control and domination. We are just going to keep banging the hammer, banging the bell for world peace like they did in Nepal. I went to on a hike. I can't remember where I was, but it was really beautiful. I had this lake and I did a hike up and there's a monk up there and he was repeating something. It's like, yeah, this guy's here like basically 24 hours a day or someone else will come in. And I said, well, what is he saying? And he's just saying basically world peace. We're here just literally meditating and focusing only on world peace. And so that's what we have with this COVID container. It's just COVID. So what if we switch that, right? And hypnosis is so powerful. Psychological operations are so powerful. And I invite people to watch the documentary, The Century of Self by Edward Bernays. It will give you such a great overview of what's going on now. Thrive 1 and 2 are both fantastic for big overviews. And, do your own research. You don't have to believe all of it, but it'll give you a little bit of context. And so if we were to use it in a positive way, because right now it's being used in a negative way, just like I said, don't imagine an American flag. Don't imagine, I don't know, Donald Trump riding a unicorn, right? You're going to do that to make sense of the words. So if we use that in a positive manner, we could shift the planet in a very quick manner.
Man, when you said you said use it in a positive way. I have an idea of what you think it might be. I think what you're talking about is the human consciousness that we're all connected to, like a universal field. But when you said if we use it in a positive way, what did you mean by that?
So specifically psychological hypnotic patterns. So rather than saying, so like the cat story, right? So just imagine every day there's just like another kitty was decapitated. How does that make you feel? It doesn't make you feel good, right?
No.
So when you see COVID on TV, you're like another 1,000 cases. They don't tell you that the mortality rate is, very, very low, but it also doesn't make you feel good. So what if we're used to these psychological operations that they use to impose fear for world peace, for altruism? In Buddhism, they'll talk about mental nutriments. I could wake up and then I could have like my magazines and my news feeds all set up for murder and weird, terrible stuff and trafficking, which, I unfortunately will look into because I was a part of trying to figure out what the solution was, working with the International Tribunal of Natural Justice, becoming aware of human trafficking, thinking, oh my God, I can't believe how horrible this is. I can't believe the numbers of people in human trafficking. How the hell is this happening? And also working on organ harvest, bringing awareness to organ harvesting that's happening in China, specifically targeting Falun Dafa, which is essentially peaceful meditation, similar to Buddhism but different. But their peaceful meditative practice, they've been targeted for about 20 years. And so that's part of my mental nutriments because I want to figure out a solution. But if I just stayed there all day, every day, it's depressing. And I have done that, and it's very depressing.
It can suck you in too, man. I've been there. Like March, April, June,
Yep.
maybe a little bit of July. I was like,
Yep.
I was there. I mean, I was just like, you guys are stupid. You're wearing a mask. I mean, I had to go through my own evolution, my own vibrational ladder of like, okay, let me take a breath here, because it is so intoxicating, the anger, the resentment, because really below anger and resentment is just sadness. Well, I think we're all really sad. I mean, if we stripped us all down to the base, dude, don't you think we're all just really sad that this is the state of the union? We're all coming to grips with the mirror of 2020.
Absolutely. 100%. I'm sad.
I'm
This
sad.
is
Fuck it. I'm sad.
I'm sad. I've had a few cries here and there. It's just like I can't believe this. And I you know, when I originally looked into this, like I said, I was looking at starvation. That doesn't make sense to me. We're talking about COVID and the lives that it's taken, but what about the 9.1 million people who die of starvation every year?
That's
This has
right.
been happening for a long time.
Yes.
And that is not a complicated solution. And my original thinking when I figured out that number and how high it was in my teenage years, I was like, wait, what? I was like, hold on. And I was like, there's so many millionaires in Canada and around the world. I was like, why don't they just like chip in a little bit and buy them rice? Because I can't imagine rice is very expensive. And so then you learn about systems, psychological operations, all these different things. And so we're observing a lot of pain. And I had Edward Miller on my podcast recently, and he said, be aware of it, but don't wear it. And I thought that was really great because he was actually doing something. He had 15 charter schools in lower income Florida. So he was doing something, but he would wear the emotions of the kids and the lack that they had. And so that's a challenging thing. And I don't even have a good solution for it. I know Ho'oponopono is a good practice, where you say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. That's kind of helpful.
Yes.
Going into the emotion or just general prayer. I pray a lot in general, but I pray even more now and say, please show me the solution. Like, please guide me, please show me the solution. And so, yeah, so if we could use this psychological thing that's being used for harm and turn it into good, like hypnotize the world for world peace, hypnotize the world for kindness. And to give one really clear example of how I notice this, and I notice it everywhere, you don't have just one channel like what is it? The crime show what is it? CIS or something?
I don't know. I don't
What?
watch TV.
Yeah. The crime show. I don't know. They're all like CIS or whatever it is, but
Yeah.
they got a crime show. It's not just a crime show. It's a crime show like theme. Like the whole time slot is multiple shows. It's
Yeah.
just murder genre all the time. And those are what people are receiving. And so they're unconsciously feeling fear all the time. They're not realizing how it affects them. So if we switch that and we used everything we knew about psychological operations, mental nutriments, psychology, the brain and neurology to hypnotize people into being more compassionate, more kind, and pump in world peace, that would be extraordinary. And it's absolutely possible. And then on the flip side of that, I'm concerned with the people on this planet that they don't want that. They don't want that for others. So we need to do it ourselves. We need to not rely on something else outside of ourselves.
Man, this is a call to arms, but it's not a call for war. Like, we have enough division, we have enough anger, we have enough hatred, we have all these things. But below that is something that I've been reading a book lately, and I think you'll love it. Maybe you've already read it. It's called Thoughts Are Things, Prentice Mulford. Early 1900s. This is some of the work that Napoleon Hill learned when he was actually teaching like the Bob Proctors of the world. So we're going like 3 layers deep back there. And in this book, he talks about thought current. Thought current, emotional contagion is what Gretchen Rubin calls it. Social contagion. Let's be honest, man. We catch emotions, we catch thoughts from other people. And right now we're in probably like the biggest thought current tornado of fear that I've ever experienced in my time on this planet. So from what you can see and from your training, which I want to dig into your story too in this podcast, because you have an incredible story, man. Like, you almost lost your life on a mountain. You've trained with monks. Like, let's go there. But before we get into that, like share with us what you see as the thought current right now, and then what you believe your voice, your community, everything you're doing with your podcast is doing to shift the current.
That's a really great question. It's really big. I think it's so individual. And I think that there can be a lot of positive from this because a lot of people are waking up. You and I, if we had this conversation 3 years ago, we would have been aware of the Rockefellers. We would have been aware of the Monsanto. We would have been aware of the food. We would have been aware of all these things. And if you have that general conversation in the public, 90% of people are unaware of that, and they could care less.
Or they would call you a
Now,
conspiracy theorist.
yeah, of course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, right? And just disregard it, even
Hmm.
though, it's you just need to look at it a little bit and you need to just do a little tiny bit of research, and
Just
you
take
can
a
you can
breath.
prove it.
Take a
Yeah, you
breath
can
and
just
look.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can verify it. Just look here real quick. No, they don't want to.
Yeah.
So this is forcing people to reevaluate. And so I've seen my aunt and my mom really wake up, become aware of so much stuff. So
Wow.
so many people are waking up. So there are positives, and they're going through this, and they're saying, "Hey, Matt, what about this?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's legit, and I know it's terrifying." But on the other side of that, I see so much hope, because what I see as a worldview is this, like, this energy of fear that needs kind of shading and delusion. You know what I mean? They need to manipulation. There's deception all over, right? But truth cuts through that,
Mm.
and that's a bunch of people acting through fear. There's not a lot of strength. It's actually weakness, right? And so they want to push against a lot of people who are very strong, and a group of people are very, very strong. And that group of people wants the best for everyone. They want to be helpful to everyone, but they also want their freedoms. They don't want to be imposed by other people's views. You know what I mean? To agree to something that they might not agree with also, but be cooperative. And so if you have those two in the same field, always the truth will win, and the truth is a lot stronger. I love the analogy that one candle can light 1,000 other candles without diminishing its own life, or like one candle can light up a dark room. And I
Mm.
feel like that's what we're in now,
Yeah.
and we're all going through an individual process, and we have to make these choices ourselves. We have to make the choice to take care of our bodies, to what are we going to put out in the world? Are we going to be looking for solutions, or are we going to be looking to enforce legislation, or attack people verbally in different ways, so we have our views mandated on everyone else? And if you look back at history, whenever you sided with the government and enforcing your views on another person, that was the side of tyranny. There was never a time where it wasn't. The people that said, "Hey, like, let's work together, and please leave me alone," that was usually the side of the resistance. And that's what we're in now. And it's crazy that people don't see that. So I feel like it's a very individual process, and we are strong enough for this. And there's people like you and so many others out there that are just putting up the flag and saying, "Let's do this together." Because if you show me good evidence right now and everything changes, that changes my whole worldview, I'll look at it and I'll change it, because information evolves, and we need to do this together. If we want to create a civilization that is peaceful, that is cooperative, that is tolerant, that is compassionate, we need to be that ourselves to the best of our ability, and we need other people to participate. If people do not participate in that idea through their own volition, right, then we have nothing. But fear prevents them from doing that. And I see the biggest danger in all this is separating and seeing people as a germ, 6 feet away, being afraid of your fellow man. That is the sickest thing to me. Don't hug. Like, it's taking the humanity out of it, especially what it's doing to kids and their psychology. It's
Yes.
truly awful. And so I was like, nah, that humanity is strong, and we're stronger together. And if we're going to evolve as a species, we have to do it together.
Wow, man. I want to pause. Like, if you're watching this live, share this right now. And if you're listening or watching this on YouTube or on iTunes, like, share this podcast, because we have to. It's our moral, heart-based, connected to God, connected to our brothers and sisters, why we're here on the planet. Duty, obligation, but not an obligation like a negative thing. Like, it's our loving obligation to speak the truth. And I love this because the truth is always undefeated. It might be held down for a while, but I almost feel like, Matt, the truth is like a beach ball. Like, you can hold it for a while. Eventually, you're going to get tired of holding it. It's going to pop up to the top of the water. That's what I feel like is going to happen in 2021. My sense is that it's going to all unravel. It's going to all go down in 2021, because we're already seeing the dominoes fall. Like, it's no surprise that these states are opening and they're saying, I will not surrender to your fucking tyranny. I'm not going to cower and wear a mask and make my child have psychological damage because I'm trying to, quote, protect someone else's health. It is utter bullshit. I need to calm down, right? You see, I become a slave to my amygdala too. What's below that though is I just love and care for my life, and I love freedom, and I enjoy being in a body, and I like eating food and kissing my loved ones, and being with my lady, and going on a walk. Like, these are all things that our ego and that life gets to experience, and they are being taken away almost like a parasite that plugs into an animal and sucks just enough blood so you don't know it's there. And the second part of that question, Matt, was with your community and your podcast, like, what do you believe is your stand for truth? Like, you've already talked about, you've really unpacked where we are, but what do you believe you're making as far as a difference? Like, what's your signal? What's your call with your brand, your podcast, and you right now?
That's a great question. Well, one of the prayers that I've had for a long time, I write them all down, and it usually goes something like this. It's, Spirit, please allow me to work with the most wise, authentic, benevolent people of service to humanity to essentially build a better world together. Who is out there doing things in a cooperative manner? That's all I want to do. I want to be helpful, and I would like to learn and express and enjoy my life and see what I'm capable of, and also give back. But I want to know who out there is looking for solutions to the planet's big problems. And with my platform and my podcast, it's always been to interview, again, like, who are the leaders in consciousness, spirituality, personal development, health and wellness, and human potential. What are we capable of? Because, like, Wim Hof, I love him for a great example, because he's like, hey, you can do this. So he did all these things that were supposed to be impossible and amazing. He's like, now you can do this too. And now this whole entire community has a new set of beliefs of what they believe are capable of doing. And with martial arts, that's what it was for me, was it pushes you beyond what you think you're capable of. So then you are less afraid of other things. And you say, you know what, I could take that same skill, determination, and grit, essentially, and apply all those principles to something positive I want to create in this world. And the more of us that get closer to a vocation, that thing, that livelihood that inspires us, because, money is basically the modern form of slavery. If you're lucky to be in a Western country or a developed country, you have an opportunity to make money, have a little bit of freedom, and then build, a vocation or build something you're inspired to do, which what I've seen is almost always of service to other people. When you're just making money for money, you really don't care what the impact is,
Yeah.
or what you're doing. So if we can get all towards right livelihood or thinking about a vocation, it's always of service to other people. And that's a lot of what I try to help people with on the podcast. Say, who are you? What do you want to do? What would you do if you had $1 million deposited in your bank every single day for the rest of your life? What would you do if you only had 1 year to live? Well, what makes you think you're going to have more than 1 year to live? You know what I mean? And so asking these questions, if you were to just give yourself right now a dream, passion, purpose, mission, what would that be? And in helping a lot of people do this, I created a course called Soul Compass. And the idea is just like the heading. Going to Burning Man, which I don't know if they'll ever have again. I hope so. Is a lot of fun. But you kind of like get a sense of who people are really quick. And you say, you want to jump in? You look like you want
I
to chime in.
haven't been there. You were feeling what I was going to say. I haven't been there yet. And I'm like, I hope they have it, because I'd love to go.
Yeah, it's tons of fun. I've also, because I go down all the rabbit holes. Some of them say it's like a dark thing by the CIA. Could be too, you know what I mean? But I say it could be like, even on the left, like with climate change, because people, they'll say climate change is this. And I'm like, yeah, I was like, climate change could be real, and you could still hijack the movement to do bad things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there could be simultaneous truths. You know what I mean? And so that's a side note. So for the Burning Man example, you just kind of figure out, how people are. And most people, like, when I ask those questions, what would you do if you had $1 million a day forever? They have no idea. They never even thought about it. And that's all I ever thought about, is like who I am, how do I want to express, and how do I want to give back? And so if you're thinking about your vocation or your life purpose, most people don't know if they're going north, east, south, or west. And it's not about a final destination. It's about a current. And so if you're not creating your life on purpose, it's getting created for you by default, by, other people's wishes for you, maybe your parents, maybe your cultures.
Or that thought current we were talking about. You're getting caught up in someone else's current.
the mainstream thought current. Yeah, it could be, right? Safety, security, right? Whatever the case is. And then you're in that stream like a stream of fish. Well, all you really need to do is start thinking for yourself, do some reflection. Then you're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go north. And you don't know exactly. And so then you start paddling north. You get out of that current. It's a little bit wobbly. Then all of a sudden, after a while, you get into a new current, and you start to getting all these new experiences that show up in your life. And then you're going like northeast, and you refine it and refine it and refine it. So you're like really dialed in on the 360 degrees, but it's not a final destination. It's a way. Right. And so you're going to, like, I didn't know I was going to do the podcast. I didn't know I was going to write a book. I didn't know I was going to interview David Martin. You know what I mean? And like, for me, I was like, I want to be around amazing people who are providing solutions. And then, part of that is traveling the planet. And I went to Egypt. I got to do a lot of cool things. Now things are obviously shifting, but it's a direction and an intention, and the universe kind of brings it to me. But the way that I kind of share it with people so they understand is, from my experience, it's like the forest. If you go into the forest and you see a beaver pretending to be an eagle, it's going to be a terrible eagle, and he's not going to have a good experience. He's going to hate everything. He's like, why am I even doing this? And then, you've got a fish trying to be a duck, and then he's obviously that's not working out. So whenever we get centered on who we are, what our own passions and interests are, what our curiosities are, and we merge that with practicing it, taking the time to refine it, and then figuring out a way to share that with others and saying, universe, please show me a way that I can continue to move and evolve and experience the things that I'm passionate about, but also share that with others in a way that I can provide for my family, make a positive impact, and do something positive for others. It's always of service to everything else. It's always cohesive and coherent and cooperative with the environment. So now the beaver is doing beaver things, chopping down the trees and making his little dams, and somehow it's always cooperative for the environment. So I feel like that's the message that I'd like to share with people, is just connect to your own purpose, your own vocation, your own empowerment, your own connection with spirit. Live in the best way you can in kindness, compassion, and happiness and contentment. And just set your intention constantly with prayer and reminder to, kind of make your life a living prayer, because none of us really have any idea what is going on here, right? If you think about right, like life, we really only know a tiny bit of a tiny bit. Yeah. We really have no idea what's going on. And so, but we do know what we can intend. And having a good discussion with one of my friends, I felt like, oh, maybe that's what consciousness is. It's just the ability to intend. Like, he goes, what is mind? I was like thinking about, I was like, it's the consciousness, and mind is the only piece that I can intend, because it just is doing all these crazy random things all the time that I'm not controlling the thought current. But when I connect with the presence, I can then intend. Then I can, try to be peaceful and present, but then I intend again. Or I am a slave to all of these external forces, and I make reasons why I need to make these choices. I need to make a reason why I show up at this job I hate. I make a reason why I make this choice that I know will harm someone else. I make up a reason why I need to go do this thing and enforce my views on someone else, right? With your work and my work, it's an invitation. These are views that you can take or leave, and I hope that they will empower you to live a more fulfilled, whole, purposeful life, so you can spread that energy with others.
I love the picture you're painting, because people have traded convenience for their freedom for so long. Like, I think we all feel it. Like, we've seen our potentially fathers, mothers, grandparents, like, trade the toaster for sovereignty, trade the car, the things, the objects, for like this potential carrot that's somehow going to bring us happiness. And I love this, man. This is like one of the most practical, real, grounded conversations we've had on the podcast about what it means to be a human. We can't fulfill our human potential if we're distracted by convenience, because convenience, I feel like, is the opposite. It's like the dark contrast of freedom. Freedom is something that we're all born with. We're all born free. But I feel like it's our life path. And I love how you have this compass course, which we'll definitely link in this podcast. I love this compass analogy, because, like, man, we all get our ass kicked. Let's be real. Like, many people get beat to the ground, and it's on your knees when you might ask God for where's the compass. And so I think of this quote. You made me flash back to a mentor of mine who's deceased. His name's Alan Watts. And he said, "What makes you itch? What is it that you desire? What is it? What if you could do anything and money was no option? What would it be? He's like, that's what I ask my students. That is the path. That is the path of freedom. It is not getting some perfect job that's going to feel safe, which, by the way, it's not safe. They could let you go at any time. It's all an illusion. The only way, Matt, and I'm curious how you feel about this, the only way for us to be free right now is to have the courage to lean into something that we really love. And if we don't know what we love, just have the courage to be curious. Like, that's really where we are as a humanity, as a human race right now. What are your thoughts on that?
I love everything that you're saying, and I love Alan Watts. Just for clarity, did he mentor you in real life, or just somebody whose
He
work you
mentored me in
looked
the
at?
shower when I started the podcast in 2015. Like, I just listened to his stuff when I'd be in the
Okay,
shower, and like, so he was my mentor. Like, not everybody has to be alive to be a mentor, you know?
Well, I wanted to make sure for clarity because I'm a huge fan of Alan Watts. I was like, do you actually know him?
That'd
I
be
would have been
cool.
like,
Maybe in a past
yeah.
life. That'd be
Yeah,
awesome,
I
man.
was at I think it was he lived in San Francisco or
Yes.
something like that, and he would like on a little boat. I feel like I was there once or saw it, and I was like, that's cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a huge
Yeah.
huge fan of Alan Watts, and he was so eloquent and brilliant. And the first book I read of his was The Way of Zen. And I picked this book up when I'm in Whistler, and I was thinking, oh, The Way of Zen, perfect. I'll read this. I had to have a dictionary beside me for every friggin' paragraph because he is so incredibly smart, and he would take all these topics and just he would bring it. He would give you amazing analogies, but that guy was amazing, and I've
Yeah.
listened to a lot of
Truly.
his lectures too. So yeah, put him on, and that's what I'm talking about. Mental nutriments, right? Imagine that's what we're pumping through our mainstream TVs, our news outlets, like people like him, all these great leaders, right? Where are they? Where are these messages? And so he's such a great example.
He's
What was
so
your
good.
question?
He's so good, man. Yeah, the question was just to reflect on where we are in our evolution right now, because the thought current that Watts was putting out and the thought current that you and I are putting out literally is a dial of attention, right? So, in other words, the question is based on where we put our attention right now, where do you think we actually are? Like, where are most people's attention? And how do we do this collective? It's a big question. I know it's a big question, man. I like to ask big questions.
Love big
But
questions. Yeah.
but but how do we take that thought current and flip the switch? Is it just by doing these podcasts, or what are the more practical things that we can do on a daily basis to turn the thought current towards love, towards power, towards freedom?
It's a really great question. And when you were talking about Alan Watts, I was thinking about another great quote. There's a book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I know
Oh
you've
yeah,
probably brought it up. It's such a brilliant book. And I
yeah.
pulled up this quote because it's one of my favorite quotes. He was, suffered through the Holocaust, and he was, whatever, went through the concentration
It's
camp.
like unimaginable. The kind
Unimaginable
of suffering that he's went through.
Unimaginable. And he was a psychologist. And one of the things that he wrote, I love this quote. It says, "The last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And there were always choices to make. Every day, every hour offered the opportunity to make a decision which determined whether you would or would not submit to those powers which threatened to rob you of your very self, your inner freedom, which determined whether or not you became the plaything to circumstance, renouncing freedom and dignity." So that
Mm,
quote, I think, is the best answer for that. But it's these choices. We all have these choices to make, and so as far as practical terms of, because I love practical stuff. When I wrote Zen Athlete, it's like, how do I have peak performance? If I read a peak performance book, I want to know how to do the thing. So you need like a meditation practice. It doesn't have to be meditation. It could be art. It could be music, just something that holds your focus. I would recommend that because when you have a meditation practice, and a lot of people still don't, what it does, it gives you space between your thoughts. So if you go throughout your day and then you feel afraid, you recognize that it's just a thought. The fear sticks to you. The emotion sticks to you. And that's what's happening to our greater society. We look around, we see mass, we feel anger, we feel frustration, we might feel fear, and it sticks to us. But meditation teaches you that you can actually create space. It's like if you imagine a beautiful marble or a crystal ball, and it's just got slime on it, right? It sticks. Well, the meditation just kind of puts a little bit of a space between. You're like, ooh, light, like just peace, connection. And so it takes space from those emotions so you don't have to wear them immediately. The Ho'oponopono is really brilliant as a way of being, just recognizing that you create your whole reality. And it's a really challenging one right now. Is like, am I creating this world that's all messed up? Maybe I am in a video game. I don't
Yeah.
know, but you know, I can create my emotional state and then come back to a choice that is congruent with my own integrity. And so as I take in the information and I observe the world and I see the challenges, setting the intention to find the solution. So for me, it's podcasting. Then I get inspired to do the next thing and then do the next thing. So for other individuals, it'd be different. But a lot of people who have kind of been just say living life by default for what's offered to them,
Yeah.
they're reflecting on everything. And one of those things is their mortality. Right. So I was like, hey, do I really want to do this for 40 years? Is this really what I've been sold? Do I want to continue making this choice, or do I want to bring that power in to go through my own processes, to go through my own learning, and to go through my own way of being? And I feel like it's a really beautiful space. So whatever that's going to be for them is going to be individual, but also journaling is a really powerful self-reflection tool. I like to give my clients just my life is ideal when ...
Mm.
Just draw that out.
That's
And
a
then you
great
can think about,
prompt.
yeah,
My life is ideal when.
yeah, right. And then here's the caveat though. This is the and I always say I don't know how to do this. If you figure it out, you tell me. But so if I boil down Zen athlete in as the simplest terms of what I would like to communicate, and I wrote it specifically for kids. It's for everyone. It is the tools for peak performance. If you read that and you're an artist, if you read that as a business person and you learn what it takes for an athlete like Brody Carmichael to do a trick that's never been done when you're like lining up to do a double backflip or do a front flip on your motorcycle, the psychology that goes to that, if you apply those tools of mastery to anything else, or what I learned with training with the Shaolin monks, if you apply that to general business, you will smash it, I assure you, because you don't have that necessity. You don't have the necessity of like, oh, well, if I don't succeed at this, I'm not going to break both my legs simultaneously or maybe my back and die. It's like you can kind
Yeah.
of relax. And the same with, regular sports psychology. When I listen to some of the sports psychologists and books out there, I can kind of tell what they've done, and they haven't done anything that put themselves at risk, because the people who have, they might not have the same training, but they speak differently. And I can tell they know, because there's a little bit of a difference when like, you can break both your legs or somebody's going to punch you as hard as they can in the face. It changes the dynamic a little bit, but the strategies and tools that you can implement are super easy and accessible. And so can't even remember where I was going with that.
I mean, the
What the hell was I
meditation's
talking about?
great. The really like the breath has been so powerful for me. Just tuning into circular breathing, like breathing in through my nose, exhaling through my mouth. 3-3-3. Inhale, hold, exhale. Using my belly as a conduit, tapping into my nervous system so I can tilt the needle over to parasympathetic. Like whether you're spiritual or scientific, man, there is no doubt in my mind that breathing will change the world the more we can talk about it. Not everybody's meant for plant medicine. And quite frankly, like plant medicine is not the choice, I don't think, for most people. I think there should be a path and a trusted space. I think plant medicine is being overused, and I think integration is being underused. And I think that we can use what you talked about, where we have specific journaling, and we can really almost like create a fortification around our center, and this makes me think about when you were on the mountain. Like you went to some crazy places to fortify your internal strength so that you could then show up for your clients and lead this movement with what you're doing with Zen Athlete and your brand. You were on a mountain, you almost died. Let's go there, because man, like trekking Everest, first of all, who wants to do that? I see photos of Everest. I'm like, no, thanks. I'm not really down with that, but something in you, you went to Nepal, you were studying meditation, and then you had this near-death experience. Like, I don't know this story. Can you please share this story with us? Because I think it directly relates to what you just described with the athletes and the everyday human.
Yeah, it's a great question. I remember that whole rant of where I was going. So I wanted to end it and then I'll answer your question. So of all the things that I've learned in peak performance and the near death experiences, and the thing I actually had a gun held to my head and and where the heck was I? Well, Guatemala. That was interesting. I talked down a man with a machete once. So I've definitely had some interesting experiences
Wow.
during my travels. And so if I boil down what I wanted to teach the kids with Zen Athlete is if you're going to take a basketball shot, you're going to try a business, you're going to try something. First thing you do is clear your mind. A person who can clear their mind and just get centered, and a person who can't is a fundamental shift in consciousness in the way you navigate your existence. Second thing is visualize the shot going in. This teaches you that you influence your reality. Fundamental shift in consciousness in the way you navigate your life and experience. Third thing, you miss the shot. What's the most powerful and positive perspective you can have? So it's not about what exactly happens in your life, it's how you respond to it, what gives you your power and creates who you are. Now, if you can do this, and this is the thing I can't do and I was going to get to, if you can do this from a state of contentment, joy, happiness, bliss, and surrender with what you know, with what you have, with who you are, with the experience you have right now, in the very moment, now and now and now, forever, then you've got it mastered. Because if we need that next thing, if we need to get the basketball shot in, or we need to get this business goal, or we need to graduate university, or we need to get this house, there's always going to be another thing that will prevent you from being whole, blissful, harmonious now. So I wanted to make that point because I think it's important.
That's a big point too. Let's pause right there because yeah, the mindset of like, I have to have the thing, I have to get to the goal. And if I don't get to the goal, I'm not worth anything. Then the journey's over. It's like, hold on. We've all heard that the journey is actually the destination. It's not just it's so funny, bro. Some of these social media memes, the reason they're so placated is because they're so incredibly powerful and so true. Like what you just did was you took and expounded upon the journey is the destination. Like who cares if we make the shot? I mean, yeah, it's nice, but God, like who are we when we don't? How do we treat ourselves when we don't get the thing that our ego was like super attached to? So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, and to go straight into peak performance mode, let's imagine, I'm talking to LeBron James and training him, and he's going to make the free throw to win the championship in Game 7, right? And he's got to make it. If he's whole, complete, and harmonious in himself, whether he makes the shot or not, he will have less stress going through his body, which will dramatically increase the chances of him making the shot.
Yeah.
So if you're whole and complete and harmonious in who you are, no matter what's happening in the outside world, it is such a more powerful state of being. You attract faster, you go through life. It's a whole different way to ride the ship. It's kind of like we're all in the ocean and it's totally nuts out there. And some of us are holding on and like stressed out, and you can play the game that way. Right. And some of us are doing a little bit differently. And Alan Watts has a great analogy for this. He goes, the purpose of life is so simple. It's just to live. He's just like, he's like, when you learn music, you don't work the piano, you play the piano. And it's like life is meant to be played like a symphony, like a musical note. And if we think about life as more of a game or as a play of these ups and downs and experiences, it's a much more pleasant experience. It's how we go through the process. But there is hard work involved, and there's challenges, and just recognizing that they're there, and they're a part of it, not to make it a good or a bad thing. And so these distinctions can really help us when we want to navigate challenges and resilience. Right now, we need a lot of resilience, a lot of emotional resilience, mental resilience, and community is so huge for that. And so when you can embody the person that you want to be, and what you want to attract in kindness, compassion, happiness, community, solutions-based, caring, you're going to attract that type of community in. And, if you go the really dark way with this, with the contact tracing and, somebody was like, what do they say? Write your I had to go to a funeral recently and it was very sad and everyone was wearing a mask and, he's like, hey, write down your name for contact tracing. I was like, do you want to give me a yellow star too? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm not bowing down to like communist China and Canada right now. And I never knew about China's influence in Canada until 3 months ago and how nuts it is. And so I was like, nuh-uh, and they don't have that idea. So, but what I'm doing with, my work is saying I'm out for peace and freedom and kindness and community. Yeah. And the people that are yelling at me, they want to put the yellow star on me. So at least I'm aware of what they want to do. I was like, you can do that, but can I run away? Right? I'm not going to fight you. I'm going to run away. But if you put me into a corner and then you want to fight, like that's probably not going to be good for you.
Well,
you know
because
what I mean?
love does not cower in the face of evil. Like people in the spiritual community, man, and I'm glad you brought this up. The spiritual community is rife with like, it's all good vibes only, love and light. Take the higher road. It's like, that's not true, because even in unity is duality. Okay? Like, we have to have them both. That's how God experiences God. So we're in a big theater here. And so if you are backed into a corner, of course, what's happening right now, and how this even leads to the fortitude that we're going to explore when you were on the mountain in Nepal, is like, everyone's climbing their own mountain. Everyone's figuring out, do I have the courage to love, even if love means that I fight for myself, or that I let people know that I can't be fucked with, or that my family it doesn't allow to wear masks, or whatever it is. We're all having our own unique journey. But it's really coming down to this one thing, and that is, do I love myself, and am I willing to stand for love? I'm not advocating war. And again, like, I don't want this to come across that like we need to have conflict and we need to fight, and because that's not the kind of energy I'm wanting to put out. What I'm saying in different words is, if we can just stand for that love and actually embody the love, which you spoke about, that's when the world changes. Unfortunately, we're all climbing the mountain and everybody gets their hands cold and they get their legs tired and they're like, fuck, I don't want to climb this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And I think that's when the ego looks for an out. The ego looks to make someone else wrong or to attack someone else. Like, can we walk this segue to you on the mountain? Because for me, like, I've done some serious things, like physically. I've done like a 14-hour crucible. I've done SEAL Fit training. I've done marathons. I've done weight training, all this stuff. But I've never in my mind wanted to like climb the tallest mountain in the world. Everest is the tallest mountain, yeah?
Yeah, Everest is the tallest, but I think everything that you shared there, you would have learned the same things that I did. When I wanted to be enlightened, right? So one of the smart things I think I do a lot of very stupid things, I can assure you. And so one of the smarter things that I do is when I want to learn something, I try to surround myself with the best people on the planet. And so if I wanted to be enlightened, I figured Tibetan monks would be the way to go. So I couldn't go to Tibet because it is occupied by China, and it still is to this day. So I had to go to Nepal to meditate with monks there. And when I arrived, they said, "Hey, are you going to trek Everest?" I didn't even know that it was it was there. I was like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess so," because I came all the way here. May as well. And so I decided to do Gokyuri, which is one peak. It's supposed to give you a better view of Everest, and then Everest. And so it was hard because it was in the winter, but I didn't summit it. That's a whole nother animal. I was going to Thailand after this to train MMA at another academy, and I had like 6 months of travel laid out. So number one, it was crazy expensive. But that's the animal. That's where like the real legit people are. They're summiting Everest. I just did the baby one where I got to base camp. But I had a snowstorm. So I go up to Gokyuri, which is the first peak, and it's been sunny every day. And they say, "Hey, do you want to check out the view, or do you want to go in the morning?" And I was like, "Oh, we'll go in the morning." And I was hiking with this other guy for a little bit. Wake up in the morning and I can't see anything. It's just pure socked in, foggy, can't see a thing. And I'm furious because I could have gone the night before and saw it. I can't even see Himalayas. So I have to walk down, and then now 3 days up to base camp. And I am so mad. And so I go down one day and I start walking up. And the first day there's a little bit of snow. The second day, there is a ton of snow. I wake up in the morning and it's like waist deep in the top of the Himalayas. And you know what? Have you ever read Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East?
No.
That I highly recommend. That series of books is absolutely phenomenal. It's like autobiography of a yogi on steroids, if you could imagine that. And apparently it's legit. Baird Spalding, the author, apparently it's, everyone that I've talked to is like, yeah, that's a legit set of books. It's wild. Like things are materializing, ascended masters are coming, like Yogananda's story. So walking up there, I think it was that day or the day before, I saw a monastery on the side of the mountains, 4 days up, 5 days up, trekking to Everest. There's a monastery. And I talked to my guides. I was like, "Do you know what that is?" And they're like, "No." And there's this monastery on the edge of a cliff, eyesight, 4 days up. So there are monasteries out there. I don't know how they get there, but it's
What's the
big and
elevation? What's the elevation on this monastery?
I have no idea, man. Like, so they even getting into the first day, you fly in and you do this super sketchy airport. I'm looking it up before I go. It's like literally the most dangerous airport in the world. This little tiny runway. You like basically fly into the side of a mountain, the short runway, but it's high. But it was 4 days up. that I saw this monastery on the side of a mountain, and they're like, we don't know how to get there. I was like, are you serious? They're like, yeah. And I also asked my guide just for fun. I was like, hey, I was like, have you guys ever seen a Yeti? And my guide immediately says this, nope, but my dad said he saw one. That was his answer. So I was like, cool. If Yetis exist, these guys would see them, right? They trek it all the time. So a little side note. So I start to go, and so on this day where it really snows, my guides say to me, if you don't get to the next thing, because you have 2 days back up, you're not going to see the peak of Everest. And after missing the first, scenic view, there's no way I'm going to miss this. So I say, okay, let's go. We walk out, we start walking, and it's knee and waist deep snow. And if you've ever walked through knee and waist deep snow, you know how challenging that is. And we tried to get across this valley, and we were walking for about 2 hours and got nowhere. So we had to retreat down. And it's such an immense amount of energy. I was sweating so profusely, and I was really high up. So now all my stuff is soaked because it's inner and outer soaked. We have a little bit of lunch and we start walking again. And now the temperature drops and it starts to get to nighttime. And they're like, we go across this kind of this valley, and we see one set of people, and they say, don't go because no one's left. So we're the only ones that have tried to go up, and one person tried to go down. And they said, don't go. And we're about at this big pitch, and my energy starts to go down, and they say, hey, we can't stop here because you will not see Everest with your time frame. So I was like, all right, well, let's keep going. So I keep walking, and my energy starts to deplete more and more and more. I'm kind of using these psychological tools to say I have lots of energy. This is easy, blah, blah, blah. But it keeps depleting. As I'm going up this hill, I start taking rests on rocks over and over, taking more rests, and my eyes start to close. And at this point, I can't even really feel my body. And it gets to the point where I'm halfway up this pitch and I'm fully depleted with energy. I hear my voice, but outside of myself, say, it's okay, Matt, go to sleep. Not my inner voice. Like it's something that's never happened before or it's never happened since. It was my voice like outside of myself, but like a different thing, not my inner dialogue. And I was like, that's super weird. That's not good. I need to figure out what's going on here. So I kind of went into robot mode, realized I was in trouble, got to the top of this pitch, which ended up being, they're like, hey, this is Everest Graveyard. I was like, oh, shoot. So continue to hike for about
You showed up at the graveyard?
So by the time I got to this top pitch, after I heard my voice in this weird metaphysical world type of deal, that at the top of the pitch was the graveyard. So I was like, this is like, I can't believe this is happening. And so I was like, I just got to get to this place. So another hour through of walking through deep snow, we cross this valley. I get to this, the cabin, and I saw it like 100 meters away. I could have fallen and just been totally this is why it was scary, because it wasn't scary. It was peaceful. Me, with the idea of me stopping, and like at one point, like just before about 200 meters away, I see that we had to cross like water in boots, and like it's Himalayan middle of the winter water trek 1 day out from Everest, and I didn't care. I couldn't feel my body. I could have lied in the water comfortably and just went to sleep and been totally cool with it mentally. That's why it was terrifying. So like I was like not resisting it. So it was like this other process of like robot mode getting me out of there. So we get to the cabin. I take off my clothes. They're all soaking wet. I can't eat the soup. And they use like yak dung for everything. And they make a little fire and they're going to close it off. I was like, you guys need to make another fire for me. They're like, no, we're rationing. It's like, you need to make me another fire. They make me another fire. I wake up the next morning. I think I'm okay. And I start walking, and I have no energy in my body whatsoever. Basically, get to Everest, get helicoptered out because I'm seeing it. I'm like, as soon as I see this thing, I'm getting out of here. Yeah. I see it. I get helicoptered down. And, as they're kind of treating me, I talk to the doctor, and he goes, did you know that you were in a record-breaking snowstorm? From what you described, your body was shutting down. And had you gone to sleep or your body went into hypothermia, you weren't getting out that night because of the storm. We would have to wait till the morning. You would have been toast. And so it took me about a day and a half to kind of recover and, get back to my senses. But that was, probably the first of like 4 or 5 near-death experiences I've had. And each one is just a reminder for me of, am I being honest and intentional with my life and myself? So I don't purposely put myself in dangerous situations, although it tends to happen because I'm a bit more of an extreme person. It more is like, I know I'm capable of a lot and I'm connected to, not because I'm special, but because all people are capable of a lot. And I'm connected to a greater force, and we all are, and life is not permanent. And I'm guided and I'm protected by that same force that protects everything in the universe. And as long as I'm honoring myself when I have my own inner dialogues and I know what is my right and wrong, what's my integrity, what's my contribution, and I can be honest with that, I know if I'm living a good life because they're by my own standards, because there's so little about this world that I understand and know for sure. Information evolves, as far as what we know from consciousness, we only perceive a tiny little bit of information, tiny little bit of the light spectrum,
Yeah.
tiny little bit of the sound spectrum. But what we do know is what our intentions are, who we want to be, how we treat others. And so we do know some things. And so I try to make sure that those things that I can control, I'm very deliberate with, and I do my best to be consistent with. Definitely not perfect. You know what I mean? My dad really pissed me off today when he was being a butt and I wasn't the kindest, but, so we just got to do our best in this world, I think. And if we can continue to do that and honor ourselves and honor our lives as special and honor everyone else's journey with where they are, whether
Yeah.
they're in fear and creation, whatever, offer them a hand up, not a a baseball bat to the head down, and that will be up to us, like, the character that we build within ourselves.
I mean, this story, like it's cool when you were saying it because I could actually see it. I could actually see the field and the snow and the yak dung and the cabin and the doctor and all this. And the one thing I was thinking was, holy shit, I've almost died on a mountain too. I hiked Mount Whitney for the third time, and I got high altitude edema, so my brain started to swell. And
Oh, wow.
luckily, I had a friend with me, and he walked me down. But it was a full moon that night, and a lot of things that I'll share on some other podcast at some other time. But that really cracked me open. Like it was a part of my hero's journey, like it was initiatory. And that's the energy that I get from you on this mountain, was like, that was an initiation for you. Like what did that, you had beautiful awareness right now, but at that time, what did you feel initiated into?
Yeah, that was the first big travel that I did. When I've always known that I wanted to travel the world and I wanted to explore, and that I wanted to just test myself and live an extraordinary life. Like, explore.
Dancing with death like that is initiatory, no matter who you are.
Yeah, yeah. And so, for me, it was just like, like keep going. That's what it was for me. It's like, you got this. Don't be afraid. Just kind of keep going, because you chose to be here, but it also gave me this sense of comfort in knowing that there is something greater. Like, I knew it before and I had glimpses of it, but that weird experience with the mind is like, this thing that you're experiencing, life is illusionary, and you are infinite and eternal. And I knew it. And that's what it was. It gave me a little bit of, I call them universal winks. And one of the things I like to share on my podcast, if you listen to it, is that I invite people to do 3 kind acts a day. Take the kindness challenge. Do 3 kind acts a day. Go out of your way to do it, and don't tell anybody. And this is the best spiritual teaching I've ever heard from any book or any person. It comes from David Lombard Senepass. And I was like, yeah, that's it, because it's so simple. But I was like, if you do it, you'll probably get a universal wink. And there's something strange that will happen just for you, that it's like a glitch in the matrix. You know what I mean? And it'll be just for you, and something strange will happen. And so many people have written me, they go, I love it. They're never going to believe this, ... And just they tell me a crazy story. So for me, yeah, it was that. It's like, I don't know, it increased my faith, you know what I mean? Because even now with all this stuff, like I said, I go up and down, and I wish I could stay in those states of high consciousness, of certainty, right? And I've had guests on my show where I feel like they do live in that certainty quite a lot of the time, and I think it's beautiful and magical. I'm definitely not there. I fluctuate between certainty and frustration and anger, occasional rage. There's peace in there too, and sometimes all of that comes from skateboarding alone. And so I think that that's a part of it. But yeah, life is beautiful, and I do think that there is a divine force, that life's like with all this negative stuff that you and I see, I think that that life force, right? Like you chop down a forest, but somehow life continues. I feel like that life force is stronger than any kind of darkness or suppression or evil that exists on this planet. And we need to just make those choices to maintain our own integrity so that when we do die, that we honored ourselves and not some other thing.
Yeah. I mean, that could have been an entire podcast of its own, your story going up the mountain. And for some reason, what I was feeling was, God, that's when we all understand how precious life is, when we're threatened with it. And the initiation of like all the heroes' journeys, whether it's Star Wars or Indiana Jones or any of these, it's all the same story. It reminds me of, have you seen the movie Finding Joe? It's a documentary
No.
series. You would love it. We're gonna link. I mention this all the time. That the people listening to the show are gonna be like, "You've already talked about this like 10 times." I know because it's so good. Have you watched it? I mean, that's why I'm bringing it up. They talk about the stone Buddha in the beginning, where there's the stone Buddha, and there was this like temple, and it was really just who we are, the love and the consciousness and the power that we hold. And over the course of time, there was wars, and the village got taken over, and the gold Buddha got covered with dirt and clay and mold. And so one day, like, hundreds of years later, there was a gentleman taking a walk in the forest, and all of a sudden he sees this little speck of gold. And he picked it off, and he went to the village, and everybody came, and it's like everyone had remembered that icon of the gold is exactly the same gold inside of us. And so we spend our lives picking away at all the crap to reveal the gold inside of us. And whether you're metaphor driven or not, like your story, what you just shared, man, about like almost leaving the planet, was really a way for you to have even more gratitude for the fact that you're here. And that's what all this shared suffering, this COVID, this stress, all this stuff, that's what God, experiencing God, is all about, is reminding us that the suffering is actually where we get to have a little bit of bleeding of gratitude for one another, that we're actually here. Like we made it, like we're here on the planet together. And so as we get to the end of this time together, man, and I'd love to have you back on the show again too, because I feel like we just like scratched the tip here. But as we get to the end of the show, like we've explored a lot of concepts. We talked about consciousness quite a bit. You shared an incredible story, which there's people commenting all about your story. Someone, it's actually my brother. He said the scene where the Japanese hikers almost gave into the spirit of death. Have you seen Dreams by Kurosawa? Have you seen Dreams by Kurosawa?
No,
Neither.
I don't know. This you got to link this up for me. It sounds like all good stuff.
Neither have I.
You know what? As a side note, I really like really out there movies. I've seen a lot of documentaries, but I also watch a lot of movies. What is that movie called? I'm going to remember the best movie ever, and I'm going to recommend it. Sweet. As you continue to talk. I remember, yes. But it's so interesting, and it really shows, like, I think movie and documentary can help give us a glimpse into what we're experiencing now. You know what I mean? And so yes. When you're talking about the emotional things, I think about alchemy, and most people think alchemy is turning lead to gold, which is part of it. But really, what the true alchemy is taking that negative emotion and creating the positive from it. So it's like the fuel. You take in the coal and you transmute it. And I feel like that's what's happening on the planet. We're taking in all this suffering and this awfulness and this trauma. And if we can transmute it, if we can have the strength and resilience to weather it, and that's going to be the fuel for humanity 2.0. To say we don't want to go back there. We don't want to go back to fear of everyone, of mass, of suppression, of being suppressed by all these different things that didn't work. Yeah. We need to go based on these values, these virtues, and be that individually first and foremost, and impeccable integrity with our own actions, and that should flower out to the community. And as I ranted, the movie, check it out. It's the trippiest movie I've ever seen. It's called The Holy Mountain. And there's a scene, I don't want to give it away, but it shows other civilizations kind of at one point in it. And I thought to myself during this coronavirus thing, I was like, I bet you it would take 1 or 2 generations for them to make us walk on our hands and knees, right? You've seen that if the coronavirus is 3 feet tall, everyone would go on their hands and knees. You've seen that one, right? People would do that, guaranteed. So it would take 1 or 2 generations to do that to the general mass media. I guarantee it. And then 2 or 3 other generations before we even forgot we could stand up. If we just go along with what something outside of us tells us that we're capable of. the government doesn't tell me what to be afraid of as far as viruses and stuff. I get to make my own choice. You know what I mean? And if I look through the evidence of this thing is super frightening, I can make my own assessment of what I like to do. That it shouldn't they should inform me to the best of their ability, but not enforce on me things that I may or may not agree with, because that's a belief. Maybe maybe I don't believe it, and maybe I trust in my immune system, and I don't want a needle because I don't trust you and I don't know what's in it, and I'd rather trust my own body's intelligence, and I'd like that freedom, please.
Well, this movie sounds awesome. I'm totally going to check it out. And yes, it will be in the show notes. And what I was getting towards was this question of wellness. And before I get there, man, because I love how you and I can ping pong, it's really cool to do a podcast with somebody who runs a podcast, because we're exploring so much, yet we're always moving forward in this conversation. Like, this has been awesome. Like, this actually reminds me why I podcast. I have so many of these like huge people with like millions of followers and, 15 books, and they're on Dr. Oz. And sometimes I'm like, it's not as fun. Like, this is way more fun because people understand what you're saying because your heart is open. And I think that is the duality that I'm leading towards here in this last question. It's like, how do we make sense of all this thing? I don't know if the human brain, the limbic system, was designed for constant adulation and constant pleasure. I don't hold judgment against these people that rise into their ego, because I don't know what it's like to be them and have 50 million people shouting my name and loving me. But the big question is this, man, with the movie you mentioned, with the story we've explored and all the things, how would you define this wellness question, this quotient of like, how do we live well? What is Matt Belair's definition of wellness, to actually live well in this current reality? We understand that like there's probably citizens out there in like different galaxies that they don't have to deal with duality. They're always in love. But here right now in this 3D, how do you define living well? How do you define wellness in this world?
That's a really great question. And right now, more challenging than ever. I think that wellness has to be defined by the individual. And I feel like it will include mental, emotional, and spiritual. And so some of the spiritual community and wellness community, they'll talk about different things, but I look at their physical body and I'm like, you should probably take care of that. Like, that's something that's easy, not a judgment, but that is our vessel. We want to take care of our body. So, taking stock of that, our relationships, our relationship to ourselves, and our integrity with who we are and who we came here to be. I've worked with so many different people, and money is such an interesting thing. Like, and how people will, what do they like just sacrifice a little bit of who they are for the dollar bill. Like, my suggestion is don't do that. That's what wellness is to me. It's like inner wellness and outer wellness of what you're putting out. So mental, emotional, spiritual, and right now, compassion and kindness over anything. And if people are attacking you, tolerance to the best of your ability. And I know there's been times where I'm just going in my head of what I'd like to reply to people. And for the most part, I've been good, but I really want to go ape bananas on them, right? And just to be in integrity. And I was talking to one of my best friends about all this, and I ask these questions on my podcast all the time, and I appreciate the kind words and chatting to you. This has been great too, because I was actually having a rough day today, and it's like, oh my God, I got to do this. I'm dealing with stuff with family and my daughter, and I lost one, and just all this stuff going on is very challenging. But the conversation inspires me, and I know that I'm not alone. That's why I appreciated you right away. And it's like, thank you. Like, somebody's saying something. Like, why is nobody saying anything? And why are my own friends attacking me? Why am I losing my own friends for this that I've known for years? Why are they questioning my integrity? Like, I had a good cry once about that. I was like, one of my friends was just like, are you doing this for likes? I was like, you've known me since high school. You've watched me do everything that I've done. You've seen me work for 5 years.
Yeah.
You've seen me talk about organ harvesting, going to China. You've seen me commit to it. I've tried really hard to make a difference, man. Like, what the hell? What in my actions have made you think that I'm not trying to figure out this so you can, make a good choice? And maybe this is a threat over here, and so you can become aware of it and make a different choice. So super challenging. So wellness to me is physical, emotional, and spiritual. But at this point, it's like, I think it's super important that we look for the solutions. We find the people looking for solutions, thinking about solutions, and we connect with them. Because my friend we were chatting, and he said you can either tear down what you don't want, which is going to take energy, or look to build what you do want. And so what is your unique offering, and whatever that expression may be? And if you're not sure yet, maybe reach out to somebody already doing it. Maybe volunteer, start prayer, or connection to spirit in your own way, because I feel like your own inner guidance system. And actually, on a spiritual level, wellness would be your connection with spirit and God and the universe. When you're like at that holy shit moment, and I had this on the podcast a few ago, but it was like someone was telling a story. It's like, I know what you're talking about. It's that moment where you're so crumbled, where you reach out to God for help, like literally, like you're gonna die.
Yes.
That's what near death experience is. You're like, oh my God, like something outside of me help me, because I'm totally screwed right now. And if you've had that experience, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so can you connect to that on a daily basis? Because that's always available. And if we do, we're going to be guided. And I think this is like the planetary alchemy. Can we achieve peace as a species? It is absurd that humanity is not peaceful. With all that we know, with all that we've learned, with how far we've evolved, we can achieve peace as a planet. And maybe after this, we say, hey, let's change that COVID talk to peace. Mm-hmm. We create rules, legislations. No, why am I saying that's awful? That's old stuff. Scratch that. Let's try again. Let's create guidelines and ways of being that just make that natural and harmonious, that everybody just wants to participate in that game. And the people that don't, they're just over there in their own place, and they're welcome to this new idea, to this new way of being. And yeah, let's commit to that with the same level of ferocity and intensity and passion.
Man, what an enjoyable conversation. Like I didn't know exactly how it was going to go, but I had a feeling, and I trust that feeling. It's, Abraham Hicks, I used to listen to her back in the day, and she calls it the inner guidance, right? Your inner guidance, trust your inner guidance. And I knew that we would have this conversation when it meant the most, because we've been getting after it. Like you and I both have been interviewing a lot of people that are in alignment with that new narrative, that new current that we're creating. And so I just want to give you a heartfelt piece of gratitude for the work that you've been doing. And mattbelair.com is the website. People can reach out to you. And I just want to leave with one piece of wisdom too, that I've been learning, and feel free to jump on top or just say goodbye, whatever you're feeling. And this wisdom is like, I cannot do anything if I'm not embodying it myself. Like if I am not working on my inner child wounds, my relationship with my father, my mother, my beautiful partner, Carrie, like my body, my thoughts, my cold therapy, my exercise, my kettlebells, my community, if I'm not taking a breath and like loving me, and I'm not saying this like, you need to love yourself. I'm saying it like, if I'm not loving myself, there is no way that I'm going to enroll anyone else into the new thought current. So I just want to put that out there into the consciousness for everyone. Like, this is an invitation. Catherine Dixon, thank you for being here. Invitation. Yeah, this is an invitation for us to do the inner work and love ourselves. That's how we change the world. No other way. I'm not going to change the world by forcing and pushing and being angry at other people. Like, it comes from me.
Beautifully said. And I really like your those little mini quotes that you do on your show and like promote the show. So make sure you quote that one, because I'll share that. That was really beautifully said. The last thing that I'll share is, I think only so much can be done in the mind, because the mind is so limited, but there's a lot more that can be done in the heart. Sometimes we just need to experience it. If you experience loss, you just experience that emotionally. You don't logically go through that loss and right. The mind will do stuff, but it's basically useless crap. Right. You have to emotionally go through it. And I think that the heart's intelligence is becoming more well known, but not understood how to engage in it. And so I remember this one time I had a friend who's so analytical, and I asked the question, if you were infinite and God or had $1 million, what would you do with your time? How would you spend your day? And he's so logical. I knew he couldn't answer the question. So I just decided I was going to hypnotize him into his heart. Hypnosis is just guided meditation. It's nothing crazy. Most people just can't relax their mind. You just help them relax. That's all it is. But where you focus is important. So if you do a little thing and you focus on the tip of your finger, you'll notice the tip of your finger. You could focus on a lemon. And I do that exercise when I'm training sometimes where I get them to imagine a lemon and bite it and your mouth waters. It's really cool. So what happens when you focus on your heart? Well, the mind, when we ask the question to the mind, it's limited and it's also designed to keep us safe. For us to stay safe, we need food. And to get food, we need these money things. And so if I say, "Hey, what would you do if you had $1 million in the bank, or you could do anything?" It's the mind goes, "Ha, you dummy." Number one, I'm not getting $1 million every single day, and number two, that this is hypothetical. So whatever. So they're going to distort that answer because it's not possible. Because the mind is like, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to trick me, but I need to stay safe. Get these coupons so I can go get money. So you're not. Now, when you're hypnotized into your heart and you're asked those same questions, you get a totally different answer. And so when I did it with him, he started crying in the middle of it and gave out these beautiful answers. I was like, huh, that's weird. I was like, I think there's something there. So I started doing these meditations with people over and over and having very similar experiences. People were crying. They're have very powerful experiences. Like, huh. So I refined it over a few years and just kept doing it with people. And the idea is to find your direction. And so it is not an end goal. And I've done this with multimillionaires, with everything in between, hippies, people who don't know their life direction, people who were really clear in their life direction, but it added so much clarity. Like they knew they were going northeast, but now it's like refined just 2 degrees. And when you're aligned and you refine 1 or 2 degrees, you realize how much that changes your direction over a long term, right? Yeah. Not over a day, but over a year or 5 years. It really changes things, and it's a really beautiful gift. And so if people want to go through that, I'm going to be releasing a new heart hypnosis experience for people. So I have one that they can get from me, but I'm going to be doing a whole suite of them. And it's just a practice of going into the heart to ask it for answers because the mind doesn't know. You keep focusing on the mind that's so limited. It only holds like 5 to 8 bits of information. The heart sends more signals to the brain than the brain to the heart, apparently. So that's super cool. And so we go in there and it's just like, guide me through feeling in the direction that I need to go because all of this is a mystery anyways. And so it adds a little bit of trust, a little bit of faith, but it changes our direction. And it puts the power into the body, into the feeling, because I feel like it's the compassion and the kindness and the spirit of human beings that will assist in our evolution more than anything else.
Ultimate mic drop. Yes, humanity will triumph. Someone is mentioning here. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for these reminders. Everything that we talked about today is linked in the show notes. So if you're interested in the guided process that Matt talked about, please hit him up. Like if you're feeling that in your heart, there's probably some intelligence there. There's some really unique heart intelligence for all of us to pay attention to. So Matt, thank you again for being here. And thank you to everyone that came with us on the Facebook Live. These podcasts, all of our podcasts are video podcasts. And we're talking about you when this podcast goes live, Matt, at wellnessforce.com/group. And until Matt and I both see you again, we're both wishing you so much love and so much wellness. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.